Again, this weekend we honor the Holy Family, and even as we gaze upon our nativity scene, we see there Jesus, Mary, and Joseph as the model of family life. For us, we see in their family what we strive for and want for our families. We see Mary and Joseph looking at the Christ child. Their lives are centered upon Jesus. They are built upon Jesus and around him. And for our lives, we know that for our lives to be great, for our lives to be ultimately valuable, meaningful, fruitful, that it has to be centered upon Jesus. For this Holy Family, we see them as a family of joy, as a family of peace, a family of love for each other, of patience and kindness for each other, a family that's striving to outdo each other in goodness and in concern and care for each other. We see a family which I'm sure many times had to forgive others, a forgiving family. We see in Jesus, Mary, and Joseph the family of virtue, the good and holy family. Yet, just because this family is holy, and we do call them the Holy Family, and they have so much, right? It doesn't mean that they have an easy life. Holiness, following God, does not necessarily mean that everything's going to be super easy, just sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. But rather for them, what we see is that one of the aspects of holiness is that holiness is the way that you walk through challenges. Holiness is the way that you walk through difficult circumstances and tough times. That's what we mean by holiness. How do you do that? Do you do that with great grace? Do you do that with courage? Do you do that with love and charity and patience and kindness and all of these things that we talk about? That's what it means to be holy. We see in the Holy Family, just before they get to this point, there was the census which was called, and Mary is already pregnant. And yet they go to Bethlehem. When they get there, there's no place for them in the inn. We remember how difficult it was. We remember how Jesus was born in the stable, in a barn, in a cave for animals, not in a home or in a place of warmth. We then remember how in the gospel today, St. Joseph is told in a dream to flee at once, and he does so in the middle of the night, to flee for the safety of his family. And so he takes Mary and Jesus on dangerous roads all the way to Egypt. And can we imagine St. Joseph again, where do they sleep? Where do they stay? How many nights did they sleep outside, especially in the desert? Along the way, how many times was it Joseph going to beg for food, to beg for lodging, to beg for water, for sustenance? It was not easy, but they walked through it with grace. Imagine the dignity, the holiness, the way that they dealt with all of these challenges and difficulties. There's a legend that even when they were in Egypt, and they were there for quite a while, right? So there's lots of stories, if you dig back in time, about the life of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph in Egypt. And it seems like they didn't just go there and stay in one place and they were comfortable, they could get established and Joseph could get work that he could continue with for a long time and all of that. But rather it seems like they lived still an unsettled life. They were going around Egypt from place to place to place. Why? One of the reasons was because wherever the Christ child went, the false idols toppled over. They bowed down to acknowledge the kingship and the divinity of Jesus. They would fall over and be smashed in his presence just by a miraculous thing. And so the journey of the Holy Family continued throughout Egypt throughout those years. And then finally, when the angel came again to Joseph and told him it was safe to go back to Israel, he did so. But yet, even still for that family, they went to Nazareth. They went kind of as migrants, going there and trying to get reestablished as a family. We can imagine the long hours that St. Joseph must have worked in trying to provide for the well-being of his family. As we look and gaze at this image of the Holy Family, it's true. It is a holy family. They've got all those great virtues that we have some of them and we want more. What we see in them is a family that is united and working together, that is bound together, and that is good and healthy and beautiful and a wonderful witness. For many of us, as we think about the Holy Family, especially during these days of Christmas, this holy season, we also think of our own families. Sometimes the holiness in our families, sure, and the blessings, but also the unholiness in our families, the challenges and the difficulties that we face at our own times, and especially over these days of Christmas as we're around our families even more. Some of the blessings, like certainly for many of us, the blessing of children. If it's some of you for the blessing of your own child in this past year or at this time, for the blessing of nieces and nephews and grandchildren or great-grandchildren. It's a time where we are reminded of how blessed we are from our families, but also a time where we see the messiness of our own family life. We see the challenges for many of us. There are uncomfortable things in our family. We try to bury them and we don't talk about them, right? And usually most of the year, that's fine, right? We don't see each other a lot, or when we do, we're able to handle that, right? But they're always kind of there simmering in the background. And sometimes it's during these holy days that they come to the fore. You can't push them down or to the side anymore, but they're staring you right there in the face. And you feel like you have to do something. For some of us, there are members of our family who are jaded. Maybe members of our family who are proud or rude or loud or selfish at this point in their life. And as we're around them a lot during these days, it's harder, right? There's challenges. For some of us, for some of you, it could be the case that your kids in one way or another have disappointed you. And you're dealing with that kind of as you're very close to them. Maybe for some of the kids who are here, it's their parents have disappointed them in some way. And they're dealing and struggling with that. For others, there can be tensions and judgments that built up over the year, over time. There can be things about the career paths that some of us have chosen or any array of our choices. And in terms of faith, there's real challenges for most of us as well. In our own families, as we struggle with people who we love dearly, they don't follow Jesus, or they don't follow him closely. For others in our family, they're lukewarm to faith. During Christmas, like the time of the birth of Jesus, it's like faith isn't even there. For some, maybe even in our families, they're opposed to faith, right? They may mock our faith or say nothing good about it. There's many challenges in our families. My point today is not to rub that in, right? We all know that it's there. I just want to acknowledge that it's there and that it's there for basically all of us in different ways. We see the Holy Family. What makes them holy is not that everything was perfect, right? Jesus was born in a stable. It wasn't perfect. What makes them holy is how they dealt with it. It's how they walked through these challenges. One of the great passages or extended passages in Scripture to reflect upon, I think, during this time and these days as we reflect upon the messiness sometimes of our own family, is from the letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians. And it's chapter 13. It's easy to remember, not just because 13 is maybe an unlucky number, but it's easy to remember because 13, at least for the Jewish people, there was the tradition that a boy became a man. I don't know, right? A boy became a man at the age of 13. So he'd have his bar mitzvah, and that was kind of the big celebration. But the image that I want you to have of that with 13 is that it's the time when the boy can no longer act like a child, right? He's now has to become a man. He now has to confront the real challenges in the world and find a way. He's got to be courageous. And you can say the same for a woman too, right? So from St. Paul's letter to the Corinthians, chapter 13, would be a great thing to reflect upon, especially if you've been reflecting on some of the tensions in your own family. Where St. Paul says, we know we've heard it before, his beautiful reflection on love. Love is patient and kind. It's not jealous or boastful. It's not arrogant or rude. Love does not insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. It hopes all things and believes all things. Love never ends. And he goes on. and great things for us to reflect upon. If there's people in our family who it's difficult to be around, well, like love is patient, right? And it's kind. It's not jealous or boastful. Love hopes all things. Like maybe we're at the point where we're like, I just want to give up on this person, right? They're family, but I have no connection to them. Just give up. But love hopes all things, and it believes all things, and it doesn't end. For us with our families, I guess there's a few options and a few pathways that we can take with these challenges. We could just write them off. We could say, you know what? I've had it. It's enough. We don't have a holy family. Let's just admit it and go our separate ways. But that's not it, right? Just ignoring or writing off, that's not the answer. That's not the Christian thing to do. That's not what Jesus did. It's not what we are called to do. Maybe for us, and especially because there's things that we can't change, right? There's things that aren't easy to change in our families and in our relationships. Maybe for some things, all we can do is pray. That's something. It's not nothing. But that's all that we can do. And we should pray, right? Pray for healing and strength and reconciliation in our family, and maybe for a new pathway going forward. Maybe in our prayer we'll see like a new way forward that we never could see on our own, that God might reveal to us and show us, where then we may be able to be more united to our families. You know, sometimes boundaries are important. We just got to say, look, like, I want you to come for Christmas, but like you can't do this when you come if my kids are around, right? Or just kind of laying out those practical boundaries that then can allow for a healthy relationship. It can be. For us, the key is that we always want to keep the door open, right? If we close the door, it means that love is dead. It means that we've given up. It means that we're not following Christ as we should. And so for us, we want to always keep those doors open, at least a bit, right? And we want to allow for the possibility of change and of love of that love that we have for our family, maybe to help bring about change in them and in us too. Today, we look at the Holy Family, and we see a family that is holy. And what makes them holy is how they make their way through the challenges, the difficult circumstances, the stuff that is thrown at them. For us, maybe we're on the way, right? And we want our families to be holy, and we're striving to be better ourselves, and we're trying to help, like for many of you, your children and grandchildren, and to keep everyone together and to help them to grow in faith and in all kinds of virtues and all of that. But for us, always we want, especially in those challenging cases, to be thinking, what's the pathway forward? Lord, help me to see so that we can be united, that we can have that loving relationship that you desire for us, because that's family, right? That's the glory of family life. That's what God wants family and created family to be.